This is the PR Podcast, a show about how public relations helps you tell your story to the world. We talk with great PR practitioners who have the skills, creativity, and just plain savvy to get their clients noticed. Now here's your host, Jody Fisher.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the PR Podcast. I'm Jody Fisher. Thanks for joining us. Well, as we're taping this episode this week, we have two really serious, and by serious, I mean life or death stories that are breaking right now. One that just came up this morning about Alec Baldwin apparently shooting and killing someone on the set of a movie. And aside from the very serious life or death impact of that, it's also, I think, going to turn out to be a rather interesting PR case study in terms of how messages start getting out, and they're just starting to get out now. I think we're in that immediate 24-hour period as we tape this, and we've yet to hear a lot of detail and a lot of responses, really, from the people who are in either camp about what may have happened. Obviously, there's a criminal/law enforcement investigation going on, and so I think we're gonna not hear much, I think, through this weekend. But it's going to be interesting to see, given the PR implications of what's going on here. You've got, a very well-known actor, big budget movie, et cetera, et cetera. So there's going to be some PR implications here. It's going to be interesting to see how that spools out. The other one, very sadly, is what seems to be the bookend, or at least a very serious milestone in the Gabby Petito death. Can't quite call it a murder yet, I don't think, but I think that's the direction we're moving in. And the remains of Brian Laundrie were found just the other day. I'm not sure if we're going to get an awful lot of closure here, but we're definitely going to hear more in terms of public relations and in terms of statements to media about that whole situation, both from law enforcement and I'm sure from both families. So it will be, I hate to maybe talk about PR in the case of this very, very serious, like I said, life and death scenarios that are going on. But it'll be interesting to watch these two stories unspool. And sort of dig into the PR implications of them, to watch how the messaging really is what I'm talking about, to watch how the messaging comes out about both of these. So we'll be sure to revisit both of these in the future on the PR Podcast, and certainly chime in on our social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Let us know your thoughts. There's a terrific PR community, as you all know, on Twitter, especially. Chime in on our handle there at the PR Podcast. Let us know what your thoughts are, and we'll monitor this and we'll share our thoughts as well. Now let's turn things in a more positive direction and talk about our amazing guest that we have on this week. Let's get into it. Zach Giglio is founder and CEO of GCM, a South Carolina-based communications firm where he represents clients ranging from Fortune 500 companies to startups and community businesses. He utilizes a combination of public relations, public affairs, marketing, digital, and social media to create and execute comprehensive communication strategies, crisis communications plans, and more. He's a lifelong sports enthusiast with a love for politics, sits on the boards of two nonprofits. We're going to find out how he gets all that packed into a day or a week. Zach, welcome to the PR Podcast.
Yeah, thanks very much. I'm really happy to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and about GCM and what you do for your clients.
Yeah, so GCM, we're a family-founded global comms and marketing agency. We very strongly believe in the power of human connection and business as a force for good. And so we work with clients and on projects that we believe are having a positive impact in the world and in the communities and industries in which our clients operate. My wife and I, who founded the business, we spent a good amount of time traveling and living around the world. And we kind of noticed that one of the major constants, no matter what country we were living in, whether it was here or South Africa or China, was the power of human connection to really move the needle on anything meaningful. And so we took that idea and we started to put it into what our trade was, which is comms and marketing, and came up with this idea of how we can better serve clients. And now we work with really large clients because we believe we have now the power to scale that sort of human impact on a much larger level. And that's where the business as a force for good comes into play. So that's what we're doing. We're really excited to be doing it. We have clients kind of all over the world. I get to do this really great work for them and to put human beings at the center of everything that we do.
I love that business philosophy and how you've translated that into what you do for your clients. Do you use that philosophy when you're choosing what clients to work with, or will you work with just about any client and sort of infuse that philosophy into what they're doing? How does that work?
That's a really good question, and something that we're constantly working on. But we do use this idea on to choose who we work with. So we don't work in any one industry. We're all over the place. But our through line is that we're working with these companies that we believe either are already focusing on human connection and on how their work impacts humans, and they're either doing that, in their comms or marketing or sales or everything, or they're open to the idea. So a lot of the most successful companies kind of already doing this, and we just have to believe that this is something that we can really get behind and that we can believe in, and that we can work with them to produce something really, really good. So it's not necessarily that we work with any client, and that is really our guiding force.
That brings to mind sort of the training that I had as a PR professional when I was coming up. And you'll have many clients that will come in and say, we need to get some good press. So let's do something. And my mind and my training always goes to, you should be doing good things all the time. And the good press follows the good actions, right? And so don't do something for press's sake or for PR's sake. Do something because it's the right thing to do. How do you talk with your clients about sort of either the existing programs that they have that are doing good and how you can leverage press out of that, or how you can use the desire for press to inspire something that's good and then follow it with good press?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there's a couple ways we try to explain this concept that you just went over, and one of them is the idea of doing good. So a lot of these organizations and people that are doing good, a lot of times they don't really understand or appreciate how unique and how impactful their work is, and how much other people need to know about it, because it's just kind of within them. They just believe this is what should be done. Everybody should be doing this. They don't think they're that special. But when you look around and you're in different industries like we are, we have the ability to see actually how impactful and unique that is. And so there's two basic struggles that we have. Is one, these companies or organizations that are doing good are humble, and so we have to drag out these stories and empower them to feel comfortable talking about it in a way that is so public. Or the other thing is that they're so focused on what they think is the work that, to your point, they might not be as focused on what is the good that they're doing. And so we explain it to them more tactically. We say, look, something bad is going to come up about your company. You're going to have a disgruntled ex-employee or current employee. You're going to lose a contract. A client's going to fire. Something bad will happen. And you need to be buffering these potential bad stories with all the other good things that you are and could be doing. Because the fact is, and we know firsthand, I'm sure you do too, clients, and we work a lot with B2B clients. We do have some B2C, but mostly B2B clients. And my personal experience is a lot in B2B as well. We have had experience where clients have lost out major bids or contracts because when someone went to Google them, the only thing that came up was some not positive story about them. And so on the human level, yes, you should be doing these good things, and let us help you tell those stories. On a tactical level, doing good things is a very sound PR strategy, because something bad will happen and it'll buffer that. And this is also where, just to take it a step further, this is also where we truly believe that our industry actually has incredible power and influence in helping organizations actually do good and do better. Because we can guide them along in this strategy and say, you're doing good, you can do better, and it's going to make sense for you and your business and your community.
Also could be challenging, and I'm interested to hear your perspective on this. Where let's assume a client is doing something good, right? And it's just part of their DNA, and they do it, day in, day out, or year after year, or whatever that is. And they never really got a lot of attention for it, but they want to get some attention for it. But then when you dig into it with them, it's kind of not that interesting. Let's just leave it at that, right? I've always used the phrase when someone comes to me with a less than interesting story, whether it's about charity or good works or anything, that I just look at and go, nobody's touching this, just it's boring or it's not interesting or whatever. I'll use the phrase, it's interesting to you, we've got to make it interesting to them meaning the media, right? How do you work with clients to help them understand how their thing may not be interesting in the way they presented it to you, but you can help them make it interesting?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think what we do is we provide comprehensive comms for clients. So we do everything. So it's not just media and PR; it's also social media, marketing, blogs, and everything. And we basically have two buckets of stories. So there's the what you're saying. There's like the media ready, public facing stories that we have, and then there's also the stories that are positive and worth telling, but probably not fit for a third-party publication. And so there we're generating our own content as well, because we want to create a pipeline of social proof, or digital proof, we call it. So essentially, by being able to employ these same stories on all these tactics, or throughout all these tactics, we're creating this echo chamber so that when someone is looking into you, or maybe you had a story about something else and they're on your Instagram or they're on your website, these positive stories or this theme or larger narrative you're trying to tell is reflected in every channel. And so it's not a loss. We try to make our clients know it's not a loss if this good thing that you're doing isn't interesting or unique enough for the media to cover it, because we can still tell that story in other, compelling ways that it will have an audience. But maybe that, to your point, there is an opportunity where maybe if we did this and thought about it in a grander scale, or if we thought about it on a more focused scale. A lot of people think, viral, you have to appeal to everybody, but really you try to appeal to one person and people dip into that. Then we do have the opportunity to amplify that as well.
Yeah, it's interesting how in the last 20 years that the communications have changed, really. And so many new tools are put in the hands of us communicators to do exactly what you just described, which is, yes, you can pitch the story out to earned media in hopes that a reporter or an editor or producer, whoever, will be interested and want to cover it. Even if that doesn't happen, you still have so many publishing tools at your disposal in the form of your website, your blog, your e-newsletter, your social media, all that stuff, that you can still publish that. And some of that will still make its way to what you referenced before, your SEO, your Google search results, which are a very important byproduct of what we're doing as communicators, because you want to drive business results. And part of helping people, our clients, drive business results is what you just described, which is when someone searches for you, what do they find?
Yep.
Do they find the good stuff? Do they find the things that you've achieved, the things that you've accomplished, the good works that you've done? Or do they find that one horrible article, like you said, of the disgruntled employee, or the one time you fell down as a company or as an organization, and that's the thing that they see at the top, and that cements their opinion of you?
Absolutely.
So I think you're absolutely right on with using those tools. Obviously, that has changed over the years. Are there some key strategies that you really like in telling those stories?
Well, I mean, it's really difficult. I think, as you're alluding to, the past 2 years have been insane. I remember I started in this maybe 15 years ago. And I remember then it was like, well, the media industry is changing because of Google and all this online stuff. And so they got it. But it hasn't changed like the way it's changed at the pace it's, or at least at the pace it has over the past couple of years, where now you're having, less and less reporters to work with. Reporters are now working outside of their areas of subject matter expertise. And so they are going to all these different resources to really quickly find like where they can get credible thought leaders to chime in on topics or to cover and things like that. Now, if you're a big name brand like Apple and you have like a beat reporter assigned to you, that's not what we're talking about here. But if you're
or in the case of Apple, several beat reporters,
right, exactly, or entire news organizations dedicated. Yeah, right, exactly. So the tactics that we use is we try to we try to treat a journalist as if they're any other human being target for our message, and to understand that that journalists don't just get your pitches on email anymore. right? Like that's not the only way that they can or should hear about you. They need to see about you at conferences. They need to hear you on podcasts. They need to look at your website and see like what you're telling them is reflected. And so we try to also target journalists in the same way that we would target any influencer, which is to make sure that there's this paper trail of good stories and consistent stories. And the other tactic that I think we use, which is really unnatural to a lot of people, is to be like robotically consistent with some of the stories that we're telling. It is really hard to kind of break through. And I mean, some of our writers are former journalists or current journalists. And sometimes as like a joke, they'll send me a screenshot of their inbox of all the pitches that they're getting. I mean, they wake up to 30 pitches. And now like, sometimes we'll pitch at like, we'll schedule pitches for the weekend because that's when a lot of them are catching up, or we'll do it for like really odd, strange hours that they don't normally get pitched because hopefully like, it'll come through. But it's almost, we're almost accepting that we're not just going to, like it used to be, send one story, send one pitch and kind of have a conversation. We're going to have to like really have a very tactical, assertive, comprehensive plan to get a client who's not traditionally been covered in the media front and center. And a lot of times they'll look, I'm sorry, but a lot of times they'll like look at like, oh, I now have to cover something I never covered before. So what they'll do is they'll search conferences and they'll say like, who spoke at these conferences? And then they'll call the people that they saw speak at the conferences. And so now we're looking at all these secondary and tertiary areas where journalists are getting their information and trying to position our clients in those places as well.
It's a terrific point that you bring up, and too about the pitching on weekends or the figuring out. I've found, and I think this has increased over the last couple of years, nothing to do with COVID, but maybe a little bit to do with COVID, that reporters need more and more time to evaluate pitches, to have the conversations they need to have with their editors, to begin the process of investigating, interviewing, and finally writing and producing a story. Whereas maybe 10 years ago, a newspaper reporter could turn around a story in a day or two that would land on their website and then eventually in print. That story, unless it is breaking news, is now taking a week.
Right.
And I think that's something really important that we need to understand as communicators and that we need to convey back to our clients, because I think many of our clients, especially those who are still, let's say, less experienced with working with PR professionals or sort of having an expectation of how quickly the stuff gets done. We need to let them know, hey, if you've got an event in, 3 weeks, we need to start pitching now. It's not enough to like approve the press release the day before the event.
Right.
You've got to really spool out your timeline here to give the reporters the time to actually do the story you want them to do. Would you agree?
Oh, 100%. And that's if the event is really like some big sort of unique, great thing. I mean, like
got to cover it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's provided that. I think one of the challenges we also have is this idea that you can kind of turn the faucet off and on your PR. Like that you can say, okay, well, we don't really need that much media coverage in the next 3 to 4 months, so we don't have to do anything. Maybe at the end of the year, we'll get back. And trying to convince people that is a really terrible strategy is hard to do because they don't quite get that, especially if you're like an unknown brand or if you're trying to build and create something. The level of consistency that is needed is insane. I mean, like, they look at Apple. Apple launches a new product. They send out a press release. They get coverage. It's like Apple's been doing this for 30, 40 years. They've been drilling media. We've done a new thing. I mean, how many times? I mean, ask Apple how many times they've sent press releases that no one looked at. Because it's not about. I mean, if you're going to invent something new, fine. But it's about consistency and getting in front of reporters and getting in front of journalists. Having them look, I mean, a win is having them look and say, hey, this is interesting. I'm not covering anything on this right now, but I'll keep you in mind. Like, that's like the first win that you can get. It's almost impossible to go like, hey, I never heard about you. Oh, yeah, I'm going to cover this event.
Yeah. A former mentor of mine, and I've mentioned this a couple of times on past episodes, was very fond of saying in her relations with reporters, this is not about this hit. It's about the next hit.
Yep.
This is not about this conversation. It's about the next conversation. And that talks about what you're talking about, which is building relationships with reporters, building consistent relationships with reporters that are based on a steady flow of factual information, and creating a relationship where you are a resource to them. You as the PR communicator, that you're representing multiple clients. You're a resource across all of those clients, and you're a resource even when you don't have skin in the game. You can refer to someone else who may be helpful to that reporter, because they call you up and, hey, do you have someone who can talk about this, that thing? If you can be that person, you become very valuable to that reporter, as you know, right?
Now, it's a really good point. And if you think about going back to the human connections, if you think about any other relationship you have in your life, would you ever just have a relationship where you call someone and ask them for something, and the only time, and it's like once every 3 months, and the only time you ever speak with them is when you're calling them and asking them to do something for you? I mean, that relationship would be terrible. That person would never want to pick up the phone for you. But that's what this turn off the faucet thing is. It's like you're only reaching out to them every time you're asking them to do something for you, as opposed to your point, keeping a steady stream of consistent communication where you're offering and you're giving and you're giving and you're giving them value within your current working client base, but also, to your point, outside of that. I think it's a great point, because it's like any other relationship in your life. You wouldn't treat a reporter, or wouldn't treat someone in your family the same way that most people treat reporters.
Let's get back to the reason you're here, which is about telling stories about your clients doing good. Are there certain, and I don't want to put you on the spot too much, and you certainly don't have to name names, but are there types of doing good stories that you've seen working with your clients that are really compelling? And I'm not talking about the writing the $1,000 check at Thanksgiving to buy food for the Thanksgiving table kind of story. I'm talking about something that's really ingrained in the culture of the company. Have you run into those types of stories, and what are some of the ones that you find most compelling?
Yeah, so it's a good question. One immediately jumps to mind, and so the kinds of stories that I find most compelling, it's takes a singular person and a singular narrative, and it weaves it through a larger problem or issue or theme. And so one of our clients, they do this. They really do unbelievable work. So they work around the world. Um, um, I'm trying to think of how descriptive I want to be of them. I don't want to put them on the spot either, but they basically are. They basically go into different parts of revitalizing either like a local community or an industry in like a big state, or an industry in an entire region in the world. And they're solving multiple problems at one time by looking at people, or by helping people who have previously been left out, and including them in ways that they've not been included before. And so there's this one project that they did in Florida, where there was this community that had been really systematically not just overlooked, but marginalized from like the rest of the country or from the rest of the state. And they came in to connect a lot of people. So what they do is they'll connect people, entrepreneurs who have these ideas, they want to start these businesses, with the incumbents who hold power, to show that there's actually a lot more opportunity in the local communities than you might have seen before. And so they help break down these barriers, connect people to capital, do all this stuff. And so this one person was able to get this funding to open up the first health clinic in the entire more than hundreds of thousands of people community. It was covered in the news. It was this huge success story. And without getting into too much detail, there were these really systemic barriers built into the community. I mean, they didn't even have like a grocery store. Hundreds of thousands of people live here. I think they practiced legal segregation until like the 70s. And now there's a person here who is starting a business within the community that they didn't have. The person's from the community. They got in capital and investments from places that they never would have gotten before. And it's doing good for the people in the community. And it ties into this larger narrative of the opportunity that lies in places that have been kind of shut out in the past. And that kind of human story that touches on something that's so large and scary is something that like really touches me. And I was really proud to see them get that coverage.
That's great. That's great. I don't think we hear enough about those types of stories, frankly. And it's every once in a while, I sound like a, farty old guy, but I scratch my head at what makes the front page of the paper. because so often it's what's everywhere else, and everybody's telling that same useless story. It's like the car wreck story, it's just like, I don't need to know about that from every single outlet. Tell me something I haven't heard. Tell me something good. It doesn't have to be fluffy. Tell me something good. Tell me something that's important. Tell me something that's changing people's lives. So it's wonderful to hear you talk about the work that you're doing in sort of getting those narratives out there, and letting people know that there is good in the world. Where do you think these kind of stories are going?
I mean, I think, and maybe it's COVID, or maybe it's just me, or maybe it's the world that I want to live in. I don't know. But I do think that what we've realized over the past couple of years is how much we need to interact with people on a human level. How much, like, we didn't realize that even going to the grocery store and having like a face-to-face, like, small conversation with someone in the aisle is like really impacts us in a really positive way. We've taken these things for granted, and now we're yearning for it. I mean, like, we had such technological innovation to help business work after COVID, but nothing has really helped humans work as well as we used to. And so I think these personal, emotional stories are going to be what is the focus going forward. And I see it. I mean, my wife is South African. We were there in June, and Wall Street Journal did an incredible article about their strict lockdowns and trying to weigh like their overburdened hospital system, which is already overburdened with COVID and like all this other stuff. And it started with the story of one man and his family. And then it weaved in all these larger elements and themes. And that's exactly the type of story that I was just talking about with our client, and that I really see. And I think putting real human beings at the center of larger issues is how I think we'll be able to penetrate the media cycle. I think that's where these stories are going. I think we're going to start stripping things away and simplify stuff. People I think are getting a little bit tired of a lot of the grand statements and the grand stories that we have that's trying to touch everybody and touch everything. And we want to see people that look like us, talk like us, look like our neighbors, talk like our neighbors. We want to see people that we know, that reflect people that we know, people that we want to know. We want to have some kind of familiarity with the people that are in the news, and not just some far off concept that we can't put our finger on.
No, I think that's great, Zach. I think it's nice to hear how you've brought your values into your business and are bringing that philosophy to your clients and working with your clients to tell those types of stories that, like I've said a couple of times, I think desperately need to be told, and told more and more and louder and louder. So thank you for sharing all this with us. We really appreciate it.
No, yeah, I appreciate that. And this idea of human connection and focusing on like organizational identity and personal identity and who you are, it's not something that we invented. We just independently arrived at it. And then we looked around and we saw that all the most successful organizations and thought leaders and people, they're already doing this. We're just catching up now and seeing that this is what's happening. And so we're very fortunate to be able to work with a real good group of clients and people who view the world the way we view the world, want to do good, know we're going to mess up, we're not always going to get it right, but if our North Star is focused on that level, I think we'll be all right.
Fantastic. A great place to end our conversation, and a great place to segue into the rapid fire Q&A portion of our podcast. This is where we steal a page from inside the Actors Studio, have a little fun, ask our guests a series of rapid fire questions meant to elicit just a simple answer, whatever you think of first, Zach. So with your indulgence, here we go. Rapid fire question number 1. What is your favorite news source?
Wall Street Journal.
Nice one. Rapid fire question number 2, your favorite social media platform?
I love-hate relationship with Instagram, but it's my favorite.
All right. Love those pictures. I have a habit of liking every photo, every selfie. I've said this before. I like seeing my friends. Yeah. And I know the concept of selfie is like, oh, you're taking a selfie, but like, I want to see my friends. Yeah. So I like Instagram too. Yeah. Awesome. Rapid fire question number 3, coffee or alcohol?
Oh, geez. Alcohol.
All right. All right. It's Friday. Hey, look, we tape this on Fridays, right? So that's where your brain is on a Friday afternoon. Rapid fire question number 4, your favorite on the run food?
Oh, when I lived in China, it's a thing called da bing. It's like a naan bread. They make them on the inside of garbage cans. There's no garbage in them with fire. I would grab those things on the run every day I could.
All right, that is a first. That is the first international on the run food. Well played, sir.
Okay.
All right, and rapid fire question number 5. Here's the philosophical one. What do you want to be after you finish this career?
A winemaker.
Oh, all right. All right. We'll get more details on that maybe for the Facebook page or something. Well, Zach, this has been a great conversation. Thanks for spending time with us. Please let people know how they can find you online.
Yeah, you can check us out on www.whoisgcm.com, or I'm on LinkedIn. You can check me out, Zach Giglio. I think it's /Zach Giglio PR.
Sounds good. Thanks again, Zach. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Please remember to subscribe to the show, connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at the PR Podcast, and send us a question or a comment. Our intro is by Christopher Appold. You can find him and his fantastic photography on Instagram at Christopher_APPOLDT. Check him out there and hire him for all your photography needs. You can find me online at Jody Fisher on all the socials and online at jodyfisherpr.com. We'll see you next time on the PR Podcast.